Hello there guys, Daniel Childs back here again, and Chelsea set to make their second signing of the summer transfer window via Omari Kellyman from Aston Villa. A name not many of us know. That's a very common theme of Chelsea transfers, but that's not the only thing to speak about today, because of course last night we got the news via a David Ornstein dagger that Michael Olise has chosen to join Bayern Munich over Chelsea. And what does that mean for Chelsea? Is it the end of the world, Chelsea losing out to Michael Olise? Got a bit to say on that. But then also what all of this means, I think, for the rest of the summer window in terms of Chelsea's business, in terms of Chelsea's strategy. Some things from pieces I've read in recent days regarding Chelsea's decision-making and thought process that just, again, really baffle me and really contradict themselves. So we'll get into all of that. Please do hit that like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Really does help the show out. The funny thing was, I was at Wembley Stadium last night for a little concert that you may have heard about that's come to the UK, because my girlfriend is a massive Swiftie and I have now been converted. So I was having quite a nice evening and I came out and the arch was blue. Like, very few times I walk out of Wembley not feeling just awful about things. And in turning back and seeing the arch blue, I was like, when am I going to see that again in a football context? So I had to take a pic. And then I get internet back on my phone and I start to see all of the outrage regarding Michael Olise. The deal is blown up. He's chosen Bayern Munich. What have Chelsea done? For the second year in a row, Chelsea made Michael Olise a priority and they couldn't get a deal over the line, despite numerous reports stating that Olise did want to join Chelsea and a lot was there for him to become a Chelsea player. And it was an Ornstein dagger, a classic Ornstein dagger, that confirmed that Chelsea pulled out of the race regarding financials, really, in terms of the wage bill, in terms of that not fitting into what they're trying to do. And there are conflicting reports over Olise's wage demands. So Chelsea pulled out. He's going to Bayern Munich, it looks like. Very good signing for Vincent Kompany. And then, of course, today we've got Kellerman. So I'll get my Olise thoughts out the way and then we'll move on to Kellerman, because I think they are linked in some ways, because I think it shows you a little bit of the conflict over Chelsea's approach to transfers. On the player, yes, I thought he would have been a very good signing. I still think he would have been a very good signing. I think the only thing that kind of, for me, gives me some solace or kind of like calm about it, we do have an abundance of options on the right side of our attack. And I think in one way, for those players, I think it's a good thing, because Olise coming in would have absolutely created a bottleneck. I still think actually the amount we've spent in that area is going to create some problems anyway. You've just obviously invested in Esteval Willian. You've obviously got Kendry Paez coming as well next summer. You've got Angelo. You have got Omari Hutchinson. We'll see what happens with one Omari and another regarding Chelsea this summer. But then also Cole Palmer, Noni Madueke. There are a lot of players who can play in that area. So for those players, hopefully it's a chance for them to develop a little bit further. It's not so much that Olise is like the greatest player to ever exist, and Chelsea losing out on him means it's the end of the world and Chelsea could not find anyone better, or the players we currently have can't continue to improve. I think, maybe, especially on X, it can be very blunt and, it becomes very binary, but it's, I think, twofold here. I think firstly, it's the club kind of going out of their way to brief very prominent journalists and give sort of the moon music that Olise is the guy. Olise is the one they are chasing, and Olise is the one they are confident they can be ahead of the race for. And that becoming so public, and then for it to fall out because you don't want to meet the wage demands, which, again, it signals, again, incompetence from the club. Because if you just take it from the briefing we get very blankly, if you look at the Ornstein report, you look at other ones that suggest that Chelsea walked into negotiations and were absolutely flabbergasted of what Olise was demanding. I mean, if that is the case, if you take that at face value, to me, it doesn't show a club doing much due diligence. I mean, how can you be that shocked? And I think on the second part, this gets to a broader point, is about this wage structure thing and about Chelsea. In theory, yes, buying players for less money, buying players who hopefully increase in value over a period of time, and you aren't breaking your wage structure instantly with the fear that those players are actually already in their prime and you haven't got a lot of years with them. So it can actually be a problem if those players fail, as we've seen most prominently with, say, a Lukaku. You really struggle to get those players off your books. I understand that. But there's theory, nice theory, versus the reality. And the reality is, at the very top level, if you want to buy big players, good players, ones that are going to remain at the top level, you have to pay competitive wages. There's just no way around it. The numbers have been like this for many years now, and the connection between wages and success are very clear. And they are very clear, despite people, trying to defend the fact that Liverpool somehow don't spend money. If you look at their wage bill, it's one of the highest in the Premier League. Of course, it's the same for Man City. It's the same for Arsenal. To be one of those top clubs, the wages have gotten to a point where, yeah, I think to some people they are ridiculous, but that's what it is. If you want to buy the best talent, and I like Nico Williams. I think he's a very good talent. But if he's on 200 grand a week, is that too much for this hierarchy to go for? Or he'd be asking for maybe more? That's what you're going to need to pry those players away. And if you want to be a super competitive club at the top level, you have to be prepared to pay those. Have the club put themselves in a position where they cannot pay those wages, which again is a further conversation about what the club has done to put themselves into this situation. But then also, I think it's the second part of like the players they currently have. I mean, I keep on hearing about how they don't want to break the wage structure because of the players they currently have, the wages they currently are, which are much lower level to where they were when they took over the club from Abramovich in 2022, which to some extent I understand needed to be rectified a little bit. But again, there is a reality that our current players, if they continue on a positive trajectory, Cole Palmer, Enzo Fernandez, Moises Caicedo, Nicholas Jackson, if he continues to develop as whoever it is, there's going to become a point where those players are going to want to be competitive in that sense too. And again, it's a nice theory. I just think in reality, there are just, and we've seen this continuously with Chelsea's new experiment so far, just it bashes up against the reality of football. And the reality of football is you are a massive outlier in the top level. And unless, everyone else follows suit, or you spring on something that works miraculously, that then I guess increases change in that sense, because as we see in football so regularly, people see a success story and then want to emulate it. I think Chelsea are gonna find a challenge there, and if Chelsea aren't winning, it's easy to throw back incentive structures and bonuses. That's if Chelsea are winning trophies. If they are not winning trophies, if they are not staying competitive at the very highest level, which in recent years, the reason why we never saw Eden Hazard leave right in the prime of his career is because Chelsea were competing for Premier League titles, and it was the same for many players. If you're able to prove that those players are best at your club because they have the best opportunity to win the biggest titles, then maybe those wages I think are still important, but maybe not as crucial. If you're not winning trophies and you can't offer them the money that other clubs can, along with the of course the incentive of winning the biggest titles, you're in real danger. So I think that's a longer term problem. And then we move on to Kellyman, right? And 19 million. I mean, it clashes. You're not willing to pay wages, which I know sometimes are much more important to whether a deal happens or not than the fee itself. But at the same point, Chelsea are forking out a lot of money again for very young players who haven't done a lot in the game. So I think it's very hard, people maybe don't like the fact that many are questioning the club's decision making, but how can you debate this? We're not buying very young players for kind of very cheap fees. We are buying very young players for fees as high as 65 million for Esteval, or in some cases a little bit lower for 90 million for Kellyman. But there's that side of it, but then also, of course, PSR comes into this, which makes it feel very cold, very calculated, very much transactional, very player trading, very much you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and we both will avoid a points deduction. And I have to say, from a Chelsea perspective, I don't think Chelsea have got a good deal in this at all. I mean, they've let Ian Maatsen go, who I think very quickly will prove to be one of the best fullbacks in the league for 35 million, or I think it is 35 million. And then getting in a very raw player again who could turn out to be wonderful, but it all feels very calculated. I think, Chelsea have pointed this out, that Villa only signed this player about a year ago for basically nothing. So, again, it's very financially led. And, it does call into question again, why is Kellyman significantly better than Omari Hutchinson, obviously, who Chelsea bought recently, who came through, who played a little bit in the academy, then went out on loan. But then also Leo Cassadine, Tyreek George. I know some of these players don't play in exactly the same position, but in terms of minutes and opportunities for them, again, it's just overlooking your academy, which I just think is self-defeating, because we've seen how often Cobham has helped Chelsea produce some really good players. And I just don't think it is solving what Chelsea need to do this window. What Chelsea need, and I've consistently said this, is upgrades on what we have. If you can't buy upgrades on what we have, and that's not saying, I think Kellerman could obviously compete with maybe Mykhailo Mudryk, but if you can't buy significant upgrades, then, I'm not that interested, because the squad itself is already has a lot of options, returning players who didn't have a lot of football last year for injury reasons or other reasons, who we still need to see the true quality of. And I just think, again, it signals a club that is going in a very weird direction. I think it's very cold calculated, and people, talk about PSR. PSR is a broad problem. It really is in football, and I'm not saying it's a sole Chelsea problem. But again, clubs signed up for these rules, and I just think to completely say that Chelsea have no responsibility in any of their decision making, and like a guns to their head, and they have to sell all their academy players, and they have to keep on making bad transfer decisions. They have to keep on spending exorbitant amounts that then maybe limits their ability to spend elsewhere. I think you're just insulting people's intelligence. It's one of the things that really, I lose a lot of patience. I think one of the worst things for me was reading the piece earlier in the week about Liam Toomey and Simon Johnson, about how Chelsea are going to double down apparently on these like aggressive young transfers for a lot of money. And one of the bits in the piece that got a lot of traction and a lot of response, and I think rightly so, was it was saying the best Cobham graduates will be challenged to compete with elite young signings for minutes, and those not regarded as being of that level will be sold. And I responded, I quote tweeted that by saying, will the expensive signings be challenged to compete with young Cobham graduates, and those not regarded as being of that level will be sold? Because I think it's a genuine question, because we have seen over the past year real good examples of this, where Mudryk, I think, falls into the category, obviously, of being someone who really hasn't lived up to the hype and expectation, but continues to get a lot of minutes because, of course, he is a very expensive signing. The likes of Trevor Chalobah and Conor Gallagher already are in a situation where either the club would like to sell them, they don't want to go, but they've been outperforming players in the team, in their department over the past year that Chelsea did spend pretty decent money on. So all of that combined, again, it conflicts with the logic behind it, and I don't think people should be scared of criticizing the club, or of being, there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of toxicity on social media, and I think there's a lot of kind of groupthink usually, and it's like people trying to sort of like, I'm not, the word gaslight I think comes to mind, but it's kind of like dismiss a lot of these concerns as people just being overly negative for the sake of being negative. And I always respond to those people, as I have in recent months, of like, why are those people doing that? The Pochettino thing, the Maresca appointment, they are events that people are responding to. It's not just like out of thin air, we are just like making stuff up. Like, we are seeing events unfold in front of our eyes and then having a reaction to it, positive or negative, as we do with anything else. Like, again, losing out on Elise is not the end of Chelsea Football Club. It's not the only good player you could ever sign. But again, there are reasons why you can be critical of that situation. I can't say I'm overly surprised about this scenario taking hold. We have been told for a while that Chelsea don't want to spend big on players, but I'll come back to this. It then questions where you're going to be on the pecking order, where you're going to be sat on the food chain. Because if you don't want to spend big for big players, if you don't want to have competitive wages, and you aren't winning trophies, there's only one route. And unfortunately, it's not one that's going to keep Chelsea maintaining the best players, probably having the best players, and questioning where Chelsea are in that food chain. I think in terms of size and scale and support, Chelsea, of course, are at a certain level and will stay at that level. But I think to really compete with the elite clubs, you need to be competitive. And if Chelsea have put themselves in a position where they can't be competitive, or I think more stupidly, they don't want to be competitive in terms of wages, then I think there's going to be a ceiling, unfortunately. That's my fear. Let me know your thoughts as ever in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I will see you again very soon. All the best.